This is Eric John Phelps coming with 24/7 World Radio Podcast here on December 2nd, 2024 with the third and final section of Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Grand Inquisitor. I trust that you are enjoying this as much as I am because it is so relevant for today. Remember, we study history that we might know what's pending for today. We study the history of the Jesuit order knowing what they've done in the past, they're going to do today. And so we need to know what those bastards, those spiritual bastards, Hebrews 12, did to the Russian people when they finally imposed Soviet communism, backed by the District of Columbia and London and Wall Street, as proven by many works of the John Birch Society, which rightly exposed this American government as building communism in China and Russia, but never ever said it was the Pope, and in fact blamed the Jews and the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, the typical nonsensical canard that we hear so many times today. That's what the Birch Society was doing in the 50s and the 60s, with Robert Welch leading it as the 32nd degree Freemason that he was. So, I want you to see the relevance of what Dostoevsky says in The Grand Inquisitor and how the Jesuits have continued to proceed with their quest of universal dominion, reducing all nations to the temporal power and spiritual power of the Pope, that there's no salvation outside the Catholic Church, the Bull Unum Sanctum stating that exactly what it was, that there is no salvation outside the Catholic Church, and the kings are to submit to the Pope. I mean, all of this doctrine has never changed. The men who enforce it have never changed. Their faces change, their demeanors change, but the doctrine doesn't change. That's why doctrine is all important when you study any religion. Forget about the men who promote it. What is the doctrine? And so, Dostoevsky knew the doctrine, and he spoke of it here in his great work. And he will now continue to come to his summation in The Grand Inquisitor when he gives his opinion, or learned opinion, on what the Jesuits really are and what they really believe. So we continue on page 34, as we stopped in our previous broadcast. As the Inquisitor is speaking to Christ, well, we'll go back to page 33. And he, in speaking to Christ, to him, the prisoner, I turned back and joined the ranks of those who have corrected thy work. Well, those ranks are the Jesuits. It's a military term. Rank is a military term. I left the proud and went back to the humble. Yeah, the humble Jesuit, give me a break. For the happiness of the humble. When I say, to thee will come to pass. When I say, to thee will come to pass, and our kingdom will be built up. They fully intend to have a universal monarchy in the world. The great Catholic priest Melchior Cano said the Jesuits are the precursors, the forerunners of Antichrist. He was a Dominican priest. I repeat, tomorrow thou shalt see that obedient flock who at a sign from me will hasten to heap up the hot cinders about the pile upon which I shall burn. Upon the pile on which I shall burn thee for coming to hinder us. So Christ was coming to hinder the Jesuits. That's right. He's going to hinder the Jesuits at the second coming of Christ, because I'm convinced those sinners, that secret society, those servants of Satan will be there throughout the 70th week of Daniel, and they will be there with the final Pope of Rome turned Antichrist, because the Jesuits are not really Catholic, and they've just usurped the Catholic Church, and they're using the Roman papacy for the benefit of themselves to bring their final Pope to power to rule the world for 3.5 years as the Antichrist. For if anyone has ever deserved our fires, it is thou. Tomorrow I shall burn thee. Dixie. I have spoken. Ivan stopped. He was carried away as he talked and spoke with excitement. When he had finished, he suddenly smiled. Aloysia, the brother, had listened in silence. Towards the end, he was greatly moved and seemed several times on the point of interrupting, but restrained himself. Now his words came with a rush. "But that's absurd," he cried, flushing. "Your poem is in..." Now this Alyosha is a priest. He's an Orthodox priest, all right? And so he says, this is absurd. "That's absurd," he cried, flushing. "Your poem is in praise of Jesus, not in blame of him, as you meant it to be. And who will believe you about freedom? Is that the way to understand it?" I will add this here, that the Bolsheviks were promising all sorts of freedom to the Russian people. This is exactly what they're talking about. Dostoevsky's talking about here in The Grand Inquisitor, promising them freedom. And when the Bolsheviks finally come to power, they don't have freedom. Anything but. It's worse under the communist Bolshevik Jesuits than it was under the Tsars. And the Jesuits ran Tsar Alexander III and Tsar Nicholas II. They didn't run Alexander II, so they murdered him. They blew his legs off in a stagecoach in the 1880s. But they ran the Tsars, but after they implemented the Bolshevik rule, it was worse than the rule of the Tsars. But the Bolsheviks had promised freedom to the Russian people. Jesuit design. And so we see the same thing in America today. We need freedom. We need to make America great again. It's the same bait. And now that they're in power, you watch what Trump does. You watch. Those fanatical socialist, communist Democrats and their sanctuary cities are going to secede or attempt to secede. And we know secession is illegal. It's against the Supreme Court ruling in Texas versus White of 1869 after the 14th Amendment. No state has the right to secede. Before the 14th Amendment, they did have the right to secede, even though the great Joseph Story, in his commentaries on the Constitution, said no state has the right to secede. But they're going to try to secede. They're going to call for secession in Chicago or San Francisco or wherever. And that will, because it's illegal, it's against the law, then that will enable Trump to send out troops and to round up these terrorists and seceders and send them to the camps. You watch. Steve Bannon just recently said we're going to round up 11 million of these alien invaders. Well, he's right. That has to be done. But they're not going back to their countries. They're going to be round up and they're going to go to the camps. The Jesuits love concentration camps, detaining camps. They had them all throughout Germany. They had them in Russia. They had the death camps in Poland. They have camps elsewhere, too. They have camps here. Who made the camps here? Why, it was Ronnie Reagan and Oliver North with Readiness Exercise 84. They call it Rex 84 when they set up these camps. When Jack Brooks spoke about that in the Iran-Contra hearings, that question was not allowed to be answered, that the Constitution would be suspended and martial law put in there. Oliver North couldn't say a word, and that the senator from Hawaii, Daniel Inouye, that traitor, refused to allow that question to be entertained. I mean, this is where the Jesuits are going here. But now it's going to be for freedom. Just as Dostoevsky wrote in his The Grand Inquisitor. Now remember, Biden and Trump have worked together under the direction of the Archbishop of New York City and the Jesuits. They work together, dear listener. Without Biden, there is no Trump. Without the outrages of the Biden presidency, there is no quote-unquote election or selection of Trump. Because that's the end game for the Jesuits. You watch the movie Conspiracy 13. It's a Roman numeral X111. The Conspiracy 13. It shows you their intention of bringing a martial law to the country. And whatever the Jesuits do, they tell you what they're going to do in Hollywood. In their movies. Watch it. And there's a tremendous ending, by the way. But going on. Let me read. "But that's absurd," he cried, Flushing. Your poem is in praise of Jesus, not on blame of him, as you meant it to be. And who will believe you about freedom? It's the same way with the civil march bit. Civil rights movement. Freedom! Free at last, thank God, or free at last. Oh, really? Really? Huh? The Jesuits were using the black man to foment a communist movement to drive the whites into the new right way back in the 50s. Jesuit John Lafarge was overseeing this. Lafarge oversaw a black Freemason A. Philip Randolph and black Boule Society Martin Lucifer King. I mean, the Jesuits were behind the entire civil rights movement as a communist movement. And they couldn't care less about the black man in this country. All they cared about using him to drive whites into this new right, as Betty Claremont has written in her book, concerning the neoconservatives, or the neo-Catholics, instituting Christian nationalism in America. I mean, this is what they're doing. Martin Lee, the beast reawakens. How do we do that? We're going to drive these blacks to crime, rape, pillage, robbery, rape, and murder. I say that they kill 10 white people a day, rape 100 white women a day in America on the average, and this is driving the whites to desperation because the cops and the courts don't punish these savages. All right, anybody who does that is a savage. And we don't have, by the way, very many blacks in this country that have the courage enough to denounce it either. So by their silence, they contribute to it. They consent. Their silence is consent to this. All of this is working to the establishment of the new right. But they got the blacks all motivated by freedom! Freedom! There is no freedom in a military government, an emergency war powers military government. We've been under that for 91 years, since March 9th, 1933. Where are your black leaders, or your white leaders, or your religious leaders denouncing the emergency war powers military government set up by FDR and his Jesuit advisor, Edmund Walsh, on March 9th, 1933? Where is anybody preaching against that? You think you can be free in a military government as opposed to civilian government? Are we that dumb? But that's what the Jesuits promised. Freedom. Freedom under our military government. So we go on. And who will believe you about freedom? Yeah, again, it comes to my mind, Woodrow Wilson in his book, The New Freedom. Yeah, it's called socialism. Socialism. Marx said the end of socialism is communism. America is the greatest communist country in the world. The American Emergency War Powers military government is a communist government, imposing communism in Russia and communism in China and communism wherever it goes, and killing off the men that would resist it with their wars and their crusades. As Eisenhower called it in his book, Crusade in Europe. Probably never wrote that either. But going on. Is that the way to understand it? That's not the idea of the Orthodox Church. Remember, the younger brother here, Alyosha's, is a Orthodox novice. And who will believe you about freedom? Is that the way to understand it? That's not the idea of the Orthodox Church. That's Rome, and not even the whole of Rome. It's false. Those are the worst of the Catholics, the Inquisitors, the Jesuits, ! And there could not be such fantastic creature as your Inquisitor. There could not be such a fantastic creature as your Inquisitor. What are these sins of mankind they take on themselves? Who are these keepers of the mystery who have taken some curse upon themselves for the happiness of mankind? When have they been seen? We know the Jesuits. They are spoken ill of, but surely they are not what you describe. They are not that at all. Not at all. They are simply the Romish army. That's right. The Jesuit order is the military order of the Society of Jesus. That's its formal title, and it's also called the Company, as the CIA is called the Company. It's a military order with a military goal, with militaristic designs and calculations and maneuvers. He goes on. They are simply the Romish army for the earthly sovereignty of the world in the future, with the pontiff of Rome as emperor. That's right, the pontiff of Rome will be the Antichrist. Final pope of Rome, slain with a sword, risen from the dead to be the Antichrist. And the Jesuits are guiding that and making sure every pope stays in line, because they are the Jesuit generals, the praetor, and the Jesuits are the Black Praetorian Guard, keeping the Pope in line, keeping Caesar in line, so he'll be in place for the 70th week of Daniel, yet future. That's their ideal, but there's no sort of mystery or lofty melancholy about it. It's simple lust for power, for filthy earthly gain, for domination, something like a universal serfdom with them as masters. That's all they stand for. They don't even believe in God, perhaps. Your suffering Inquisitor is a mere fantasy. Stay, laughed Ivan. How hot are you? How hot you are. A fantasy, you say. Let it be so. Of course it's a fantasy. But allow me to say, do you really think that the Roman Catholic movement of the last centuries is actually nothing but the lust for power, for filthy earthly gain? Is that Father Odysee's teaching? Puissy? Pusey's teaching? No, on the contrary, Father Paissy, 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 did once say something rather the same as you, but of course it's not the same, not a bit the same. Alyosha hastily corrected himself. A precious admission, in spite of your not a bit the same, quote unquote. I ask you why your Jesuits and Inquisitors have united simply for the vile material gain. Why can there not be among them one martyr oppressed by great sorrow and loving humanity? Only suppose that there was one such man among all those who desire nothing but filthy material gain, if there's only one like my old Inquisitor, who had himself eaten roots in the desert and made frenzied efforts to subdue his flesh, to make himself free and perfect. But yet all his life he loved humanity, and suddenly his eyes were opened, and he saw that it is no great moral blessedness to attain perfection and freedom, if at the same time one gains the conviction that millions of God's creatures have been created as a mockery, that they will never be capable of using their freedom, that these poor rebels can never turn into giants to complete the tower, that it was not for such geese that the great idealist dreamt his dream of harmony. Seeing all that, he turned back and joined the clever people. The clever people. Surely that could have happened. Join them? What clever people? Cried Aloysia, completely carried away. They have no such great cleverness and no mysteries and secrets, perhaps nothing but atheism and all their secret. That's all their secret. Perhaps nothing but atheism. That's all their secret. Your Inquisitor does not believe in God. That's his secret. And remember, the Jesuits, the big secret that the Inquisitor talks about is the secret that they're busy serving him. That's the mystery. Back on page 30. The Inquisitor speaks, don't I know to whom I am speaking? To Christ he's speaking. All that I can say is known to thee already. And is it for me to conceal from thee our mystery? Our Jesuit mystery? Perhaps it is thy will to hear it from my lips. Listen then, we are not working for thee, but with him. That is our mystery. That is our mystery, working with him, lowercase and italics. It's long 8 centuries since we have been on his side and not on thine. Just 8 centuries ago, we took from him what thou didst reject and scorn. That's from the devil. The last gift he offered thee, showing thee all the kingdoms of the earth. We took from him Rome and the sword of Caesar, and proclaimed ourselves sole rulers of the earth. Though hitherto we have not been able to complete our work. This is the Jesuits. Their secret is they serve Satan. And Dostoevsky writes about this in his book. Of course they serve the devil. The top Jesuits are the greatest devil worshippers in the world, and they're busy serving Satan and bringing about the completion of his mystery of iniquity of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. When that man of sin, that son of perdition, shall sit in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. The temple of God is the third temple. That's exactly what that man that's been appointed Department of Defense, what Hepsip, he's a knight of the Equestrian Order, and he talks about building the third Hebrew temple. It's on video. You can watch it, of just maybe a couple weeks ago. This is Satan's mystery of iniquity, the Jesuits in building the temple. And it is a temple of God, Revelation 11, Daniel 9, Daniel 12. But Satan is building it for his Antichrist, using his great Antichrist, the Society of Jesus. Going back to where we're reading from. Again, joined whom? What clever people, cried Alyosha. Completely carried away, quote, they have no such great cleverness and no mysteries and secrets. Perhaps nothing but atheism. That's all their secret. The Jesuits are the masters of communism. What's the religion of communism? Atheism. There is no God. Tell the people there are no God, and they'll do abominable iniquity. The more iniquity they commit, the more power we have to bring about our mystery of iniquity. There's a tremendous relationship to the sin of a people and the rule of the devil over them. The more they read that book, AB 1611 Reformation Bible, the less sin there is in their life, the less Satan's rule is over them. That's why he hates that book. That's why he burns it whenever he can. That's why his Jesuits in Russia burned those books when they were brought in during the high days of communism in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. They hate that book. By that book, people get saved. They get the power of the Spirit of God. They're able to resist the devil, and he's set back. His mystery of iniquity is set back. But they got to teach all the Russian people that there is no God and there's atheism, and those Bolshevik, those communists, those Russian Jacobins will be atheistic, and they'll do abominable iniquity overseen by the Jesuit order centered in Rome in Borgo Santo Spirito number 5, just outside Vatican walls, guarded by the equestrians with the most advanced military weaponry in the world, guarding Borgo Santo Spirito number 5, including missiles. We go on. What if it is so? At last you have guessed it. It's perfectly true that that's the whole secret. But isn't that suffering? At least for a man like that, who has wasted his whole life in the desert and yet could not shake off his incurable love of humanity? In his old age, he reached the clear conviction that nothing but the advice of the great dread spirit could build up any tolerable sort of life for the feeble, unruly, incomplete, empirical creatures created in jest. He's justifying serving the devil here. And so convinced of this, he sees that most follow the counsel of the wise spirit, the dread spirit, of death and destruction. And he's right. Most people are busy serving Satan until they're saved, and therefore accept lying and deception. Why, that's the American elections. That's the American press. That's American academia. Nothing but lying and deception. Going to teach you the earth is a globe when it's a plane. Going to teach you went to the moon when the moon is not a planet. It emits light. I mean, everything that we've ever been taught for the most part are all lies. especially the atheism that's been taught in all the public schools and the mockery of the Bible and the destruction of any historical Protestant Reformation history. Got to get rid of all that. Since March 9th, 1933, with our military government imposed, we're going to completely revise education, and we're going to educate them right out of the knowledge of God and reading the Bible. Indeed. He sees that he must follow the counsel of the wise spirit, the dread spirit of death and destruction, and therefore accept lying and deception. Remember Christ said of the devil, he's the liar and the father of it. And lead men consciously to death and destruction, and yet deceive them all the way so that they may not notice where they are being led, that the poor blind creatures may at least on the way think themselves happy. And that's the whole campaign of World War I, World War II, all the other wars. Lead the poor souls, tell them they're fighting for their country, and just kill the Hun, and we're going to be doughboys, and over there, and blah, 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 and we're going to lead those poor deluded souls into a war that will benefit the Jesuit order in beginning to destroy Protestant Prussia, and use the American military to do it. What a disgrace. Continuing. And so, convinced of this, he sees that he must follow the counsel of the wise spirit, the dread spirit of death and destruction, and therefore accept lying and deception, and lead men consciously to death and destruction, and yet deceive them all the way, so that they may not notice where they are being led, that the poor blind creatures may at least on the way think themselves happy. Just gotta get that now. Led by Jesuit Fauci and Jesuit, those Jesuits from New York, what was his name? Chris and his brother, they're, it'll lose me their names right now, but educated by Jesuits at Fordham. It's all these Jesuits pushing the jab, and you'll be happier for this, and you won't, by the way. And so, just listen to us, and we'll lead you in the gates of happiness while we're leading you to destruction. This is exactly what Dostoevsky wrote. And note, the deception is in the name of him in whose ideal the old man had so fervently believed all his life. Is not that tragic? And if only one such stood at the head of the whole army, filled with the lust of power only for the sake of filthy gain, would not one such be enough to make a tragedy? More than that, remember the Jesuits are an army. They're the great army for power and gain, filthy gain. In fact, who is it? I think it's in The Jesuit Conspiracy by Abbot Leon that he says the Jesuits look on the world as one great big supermarket. It's one great big mart to capture all the goods and property and things they can possibly get. And by the way, they pulled that off on March 9th, 1933, when they seized every person, every place, everything, when they seized legal title to everyone in the person of their president, Franklin D. Roosevelt. It was the greatest heist of person, places, and things composing a nation in history. They took it all. That's right, they want filthy gain. Will not one such be enough to make a tragedy? More than that, one such standing at the head is enough to create the actual leading idea of the Roman Church with all its armies and Jesuits, its highest idea. I tell you frankly, that I firmly believe that there has always been such a man among those who stood at the head of the movement. Who knows? There may have been some such even among the Roman popes. Who knows? Perhaps the spirit of that accursed old man who loves mankind so obstinately in his own way is to be found even now in a whole multitude of such old men, existing not by chance but by agreement, at a secret league formed long ago for the guarding of the mystery, to guard it from the weak and the unhappy so as to make them happy. No doubt it is so, and so it must be indeed. I fancy that even among the Masons, those are Freemasons, there's something of the same mystery at the bottom, and that's why the Catholics so detest the Masons as their rivals, breaking up the unity of the idea, while it is so essential that there should be one flock and one shepherd. Yeah, that's the Pope. But from the way I defend my idea, I might be an author impatient of your criticism. Enough of it. Well, to recap a little bit, the Jesuits wrote all the high rites of Freemasonry. The high Freemasons are their agents. That's why they used Freemason Earl Warren to take the Bible that they hated out of public school. That's why they used their Freemason Earl Warren to round up all the Japanese on the West Coast and send them to camps in the middle of the country, because those damnable Japanese had the courage enough to expel the Jesuits from Japan for 200 years. So we're going to make the Japs suffer. And we'll use our Freemasons to do it. Dirty Harry Truman, Earl Warren, and Earl Henry Wallace, and a host of these other Masonic sinners serving the Jesuit Pope. You are perhaps a Mason yourself, broke suddenly from Alyosha. You don't believe in God, he added, speaking this time very sorrowfully. He fancied, besides, that his brother was looking at him ironically. How does your poem end? He asked, suddenly looking down. Or was it the end? I meant to end it like this. When the Inquisitor ceased speaking, he wanted some time for his prisoner, capital P, to answer him. His silence weighed down upon him. He saw that the prisoner had listened intently all the time, looking greatly in his face, gently in his face, and evidently not wishing to reply. The old man longed for him to say something, however bitter and terrible. But he suddenly approached the old man in silence and softly kissed him on his bloodless, aged lips. That was all his answer. The old man shuddered. His lips moved. He went to the door, opened it. This is a big iron door of the Inquisition. Opened it and said to him, "Go, and come no more. Come not at all. Never, never." And he led him out into the dark alleys of the town. The prisoner went away. And the old man? The kiss glows in his heart, but the old man adheres to his idea. "And you with him? You too?" cried Alyosha mournfully. Ivan laughed. "Why, it's all nonsense, Alyosha. It's only a senseless poem of a senseless student who could never write 2 lines of verse. Oh, to the contrary, this is reality. And there's an old saying, many a truth is said in jest. The works of Shakespeare, brief and abstract chronicle of the times. Who is King Lear? King Lear is King Earl, the Earl of Oxford. Who is Julius Caesar? Julius Caesar is Burleigh. I mean, everything Dostoevsky says here is true about the Jesuits. They don't even believe in God, perhaps. They're atheists, of course. That's why they instill atheistic communism. That's why they've wrecked this place in America, putting atheism everywhere and destroying any Bible truth and attempting to destroy the true science that the earth is no more than 6,000 or 7,000 years of age. It's not millions of years old, and that God created it in 6 literal days. That's the only scientific conclusion you can possibly come to if you believe in mathematics, the mother of all sciences, that it's impossible for any of this to evolve by chance, by atheistic chance. And yet that's what you pay your property tax to finance. God deliver us. Going on. Why, it's all nonsense, Alyosha. It's only a senseless poem of a senseless student who could never write 2 lines of verse. Why do you take it so seriously? Surely you don't suppose I am going straight off to the Jesuits to join the men who are correcting his work? That's the first thing I think is their Bible correction. They regard the Reformation Bible as that serpent that bites us and gnaws on us. You can read that in the Jesuit Conspiracy by Leone, until we grab it by the tail. Yeah, with the Revision Committee in the 1870s, 1880s, giving England a new Bible, a revised Bible, in America a new Bible, American Standard Version 1901, the English Revised Version of 1885, and that would be the beginning of the end for white Protestant Saxon Anglo-Saxon Reformation Western civilization. Yeah, they're correcting the work of Jesus Christ. Good Lord, it's no business of mine, I told you. All I want is to live on to 30 and then dash the cup to the ground. But the little sticky leaves and the precious tombs and the blue sky and the woman you love, how will you live? How will you love them? Alyosha cries sorrowfully. With such a hell in your heart and your head, how can you? No, that's just what you are going away for, to join them. If not, you will kill yourself. You can't endure it. There is a strength to endure everything, Ivan said with a cold smile. What strength? The strength of the Karamazovs? The strength of the Karamazov baseness? To sink in debauchery, to stifle your soul with corruption, yes? Possibly even that, only perhaps till I am 30 I shall escape it, and then. How will you escape it? By what will you escape it? That's impossible with your ideas. In the Karamazov way again. Everything is lawful, you mean? Everything is lawful, is that it? Ivan scowled, and all at once turned strangely pale. Ah, you picked up yesterday's phrase, which so offended Virusov, and which Dmitri pounced upon so naively and paraphrased. He smiled queerly. Yes, if you like, everything is lawful. Since the words have been said, I won't deny it. And this is the Masonic teaching of Albert Pike. Do with thy will, for this is the whole of the law. Satanic, Masonic, and Jesuitical. Machiavellian. The Jesuits are the great Machiavellists. The ends justify the means. We will do anything to bring about our satanic kingdom of Satan, with the Pope of our choosing and control ruling the world from a third Hebrew temple in Jerusalem. That's why the government of Israel is run by the Pope. That's why we support the right of the Hebrew Jewish Israelitish people to their land, Genesis 12:3. But we do not support the government that rules it, because the government that rules it is evil. It's a government run by the Pope. It's a government that would attack the USS Liberty in 1967, nearly sink that American ship, killing over 100 men on that ship. That was done by the government of Israel, working for the Pope of Rome through Lyndon Johnson, when Lyndon Johnson ordered that to happen. I want that ship at the bottom of the GDC. The government is wicked. That's why these evangelicals and Baptists supporting the government of Israel. What a sin. They should support the people living in the land. That government has betrayed those people so many times. Ariel Sharon giving up Gaza in 2005. Who gave him the right to give up a portion of land to those Muslim Arabs that hate the Jews? They're traitors. The murder of Yitzhak Rabin, done by Shin Bet controlled by the Pope of Rome. I mean, all this high-level treason of the government of Israel against the people living there. Don't you dare equate that government with the people who live in Israel, as you should never dare equate us Americans with that military government ruling in Washington, District of Catholics, District of Communists, District of Criminals, run by the Jesuits. The Jesuits run CIA and Mossad together. All the international intelligence community is one. It's united. There is no them and us, because it's united under the Jesuits, and overseeing it, by the way, from Gregorian University in Rome, the largest Jesuit university in the world. Overseeing NSA, CIA, FSB, MI5, MI6, Mossad, Pakistani ISI. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It's all Masonic, run by the Jesuits at the top. So, Yes, if you like, everything is lawful. Since the words have been said, I won't deny it. Alyosha looked at him in silence. I thought that going away from here, I have you at least, Ivan said suddenly, with unexpected feeling. But now I see that there is no place for me, even in your heart, my dear hermit. Remember, he's an Orthodox hermit. The formula, all is lawful, quote unquote, I won't renounce. Will you renounce me for that? Alyosha got up, went to him, and softly kissed him on the lips. That's plagiarism, cried Ivan. Highly delighted. See, this is what the prisoner did to the Jesuit priest, and this is what his brother's doing to him. That's plagiarism, cried Ivan, highly delighted. You stole that from my poem. Thank you, though. Get up, Alyosha. It's time we were going, both of us. The end of the Grand Inquisitor. Now, do you see the relevance of all this? It's the same Jesuit maxims. The ends justify the means. There is no God. All the people are animals. We're going to govern them and they're going to like it. We'll have all the power. They won't have any. And we serve Satan. That's our great mystery, our great secret. Well, it's not a secret for those who know the history of the order. Dostoevsky knew the history of the order. And shortly after this, you're going to have the murder of Tsar Alexander II in 1881, carried out by the anarchists, of which the Jesuits controlled, and there were certain Jews involved, but the Jesuits ran it. Why would anybody kill Tsar Alexander II when he did away with the secret police? He did away with the Okhrana. He emancipated the serfs. He was having a constitution written for Russia. All these wonderful things Alexander II was doing until these atheists, these haters of good, blew up his carriage and blew his legs off and killed him on the third attempt. Solzhenitsyn writes about this in his Gulag. It was in the Jesuits' benefit to get rid of Alexander II by their anarchists. And who comes to power? Alexander III, the great persecutor of the Jews and pogroms in the 1880s. He controlled by the Jesuits. And then comes Nicholas II, who has the great pogrom against the Jews in 1905. Nicholas II is a Knight of Malta. He's a member of the Russian branch of the Knights of Malta. And then his death will be faked with the Bolshevik Revolution. And he'll go off with his son Alexei and Anastasia to other countries, while the Bolshevik Jesuits take over and begin to kill their enemies in the Orthodox Church, some 5,000 of them. And then they'll set up their inquisitional Gulag archipelago and kill millions of people, kill off the manhood of Russia, and they will be aided by American Jesuit Edmund Walsh, who's there in Russia to oversee it, from Georgetown University. Yeah. And don't you think for one second the Russian people don't know that the Jesuits were involved, and especially the American government involved, even when it was a civilian government at the time. And then 1933 FDR, first thing the New Dealers do is they recognize Stalin, that he comes to power. Actually, Stalin came to power, in the 1930s, he starts his great purges. He kills off all the Jews except one that was involved in the Bolshevik Revolution, Lazar Kaganovich. All the other Jews he kills. He's the token Jew. The world wants to believe the Jews ran the Bolshevik Revolution. Stalin killed them all. You need to read the Opiate of the to Eliminate the Opiate by Rabbi, what was his name? He wrote 2 books. Marvin Appleton. He tells you that Stalin and Hitler worked together to kill the Jews. That Stalin killed 1 million Jews. Who ran Stalin? Alexander Paskrevishev, the Jesuit in Moscow who wrote out the death list that Stalin would sign. Alexander Paskrevishev. I never found his name until I read Svetlana, the book that Stalin's daughter wrote when she came over here in 1964. The Jesuits run Washington. or District of Columbia. District of Columbia has facilitated the military buildup of Russia. You read Anthony Sutton's work, National Suicide, Military Aid to the Soviet Union. Read it. He was a professor at Stanford. He wrote the great trilogy, Wall Street and FDR, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, and Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler. There's a book that has come out now with all three of those volumes. Get it, read it, and weep, because this is what this government's done to us, run by the Jesuits, this military government, since March 9th, 1933. And Dostoevsky foresaw the coming of communism in Russia. He denounced it. He denounced his atheism. He was God's warning man for the Russian people. This is what's coming for you unless you repent. And they didn't. Instead, they conducted pogroms led by Jesuits. And the Jesuits know if you can get a people to curse the Jews, God will honor his Abrahamic covenant and curse them. And that's exactly what he did with the Bolshevik Revolution, the Gulag system, and World War II. When what? 30 million Russians will be killed at that time. The way of the sinner is hard, and God's promises are not for naught. He will in no way acquit the wicked. And so may we learn from Dostoevsky in his work, The Grand Inquisitor, about the Jesuits that he spoke of and what they believed and what they really were. An army for the universal sovereignty of the world, and our atheists don't even believe in God, perhaps. I mean, we realize this because now the Jesuits have brought their new right to power. This is what they want to do since almost 100 years. What are you going to do in resisting the Jesuit power exercised through the neo-Catholics and their imposition of Christian Catholic nationalism in the new right? What are you going to do about it? Are you going to denounce it? Are you going to call for your state to declare its independence, or your county? You got to do something like that, because there is no cleaning up the swamp. That's nonsense. Are you going to watch these jackboots when they have the power to round up all these people and send them to the camps? I tell you, these alien invaders don't belong going to the camps. They belong going back to their country. But they're going to send them to the camps. It's their death sentence. And the leaders in Central and South America serving the Jesuits know it. I wonder if Daniel Ortega woke up to this, for which reason he expelled the Jesuits from Nicaragua a couple years ago. We have to think dialectically, people. May God help us to do so. May we take heed from true history. May we be concerned and abhor the history that the Jesuits pulled off in Russia in the name of the USSR. And may we abhor the fact that the Jesuits used District of Columbia and the American technology and other corporations to build that slave state, financing the Kama River truck factory where they built all their tanks. You can read about that in the Rockefeller File by Gary Allen. So until next time we meet, this is the third and last broadcast concerning the Grand Inquisitor of Dostoevsky. Until next time, Lord bless. Send your gift to RBPB Church, RBPB Donate at Comcast.net, or send your gift to PayPal, which is RBPB Donate at Comcast.net, or send your gift to Cash App, Eric, ERICJON, PHELPS, or you can send a check to P.O. Box 306, so make it out to RBT, P.O. Box 306, Newmanstown, Pennsylvania 17073. Appreciate your gifts. I hope and pray that you will be enlightened by this three-part presentation, and that you will see Trump and Putin both work for the Jesuits. And the head of China works for the Jesuits too. Why do you think Raytheon gave all their high technology and information on their guided missiles to Red China? Huh? I won't go any farther. This is the end of the broadcast. May the Lord bless you as you do his will according to his word, and believing on the Lord Jesus Christ, that he died for your sins, was buried, and rose again. So until the next time we meet, this is December 2nd, 2024. Maranatha.